My father slapped me in front of 200 guests at my sister's wedding. Not in a quiet corner, not behind closed doors. Right there, center of the ballroom under crystal chandeliers, in full view of every champagne glass and cell phone camera. All because I refused to give my sister my penthouse. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the heat of humiliation burning through my veins. I heard the collective gasp, followed by the sharp ripple of whispers. Some people laughed. Others just stared, their eyes darting between me and the man who'd raised me. And then, over my father's shoulder, I saw her, Elaine Carter. Federal prosecutor, relentless, the woman who'd taken down 2 corrupt senators. Her gaze was locked on me, unreadable, but I knew in that moment she'd seen everything. What none of them realized was this. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to end this. People see the slap and think that's the whole story. It's not. It's just the spark. The fire had been building for years. I'm Sophia Hale, 33 years old, senior partner at a Manhattan corporate law firm. I didn't grow up in wealth. Every inch of my success has been clawed out of sleepless nights, takeout containers, and the constant hum of anxiety that comes from knowing you have no safety net. My penthouse on the Upper East Side isn't just a property. It's a monument to every case I fought, every holiday I worked through, every time I chose discipline over comfort. Madison, my sister, couldn't be more different. She's 29, stunning, and dangerous in that way people are when they've been told since birth that the world exists to hand them things. Jobs, boyfriends, money, they've all come and gone in waves for her, but somehow she always landed softly. My parents made sure of it. Richard Hale, my father, built his construction company from a modest start in the 80s, and I'll give him credit, he's charming. Too charming. The kind of man who can smile while dismantling your boundaries. My mother, Helen, is his perfect counterpart, a silver-haired hostess who can drop a cutting insult while making it sound like a compliment. They live for appearances, for status. Madison's wedding to Ethan Prescott was the perfect showcase. The Prescott family is old money summer homes in Nantucket, a yacht named Perseverance, the works. The reception was at the Langmore, one of those hotels where the flowers in the lobby are changed twice a day and the air smells like quiet money. I was there because I'm still their daughter. You tell yourself you'll keep your distance, but then the invitation arrives and you think, maybe this time will be different. It wasn't. The tension started the moment I arrived. My mother's eyes scanned me up and down, her smile tight. Sophia, darling, you look successful. It's a compliment wrapped in a jab, a reminder that in their world, a woman's worth is measured by her attachment to a man, not her achievements. Madison floated around the ballroom in her designer gown, greeting guests like royalty. I sipped champagne near the edges, avoiding small talk, when I saw my parents cutting a determined path toward me. Sophia, we need to talk, my father said, his tone brisk, businesslike. My stomach sank. Family conversations in public never ended well. We stepped aside to a quieter corner, though not quiet enough to escape the notice of nearby guests. Helen was already in persuasion mode, voice low but sharp. It's time you did something for the family. I didn't know it yet, but this was the opening move of the night. The one that would lead to my father's hand across my face, 200 witnesses holding their breath, and a federal prosecutor deciding she wasn't going to let it slide. My father didn't waste time. It's about your penthouse, he said, as if we were discussing a spare set of golf clubs I'd been storing for too long. I blinked. My home? Helen's hand landed on my arm in what she probably thought was a comforting gesture. Madison and Ethan are starting a family. They need a place big enough for children. Ethan's apartment in Midtown is, it's fine for 2, but hardly suitable for raising kids. They're not pregnant, I said flatly. They will be, she replied. Like she'd already scheduled the conception. Madison must have been lurking nearby because she appeared suddenly, her gown catching the light like some celestial warning sign. Ethan trailed behind her, looking vaguely apologetic but saying nothing. We've already talked it over, Madison said brightly. Your place is perfect for us, 3 bedrooms, Central Park views, close to Ethan's office. She spoke as though she were reading the description from a real estate listing she'd already claimed. I felt my pulse pick up. You want What? To buy it? My father's chuckle was humorless. No, Sophia. Family doesn't nickel and dime each other. We're asking you to give it to them. You can take Ethan's apartment. It's perfectly adequate for a single woman. Perfectly adequate turned out to mean a one-bedroom with a view of a brick wall. I laughed sharp, incredulous. You want me to trade my penthouse for a shoebox in Midtown? Madison's smile thinned. You don't even use all that space. What do you need 3 bedrooms for? You don't even have a boyfriend. The jab hit, but I didn't flinch. I need them because it's my home. I earned it. I paid for it. I'm not giving it up. Helen's eyes narrowed. Selfish. Always so selfish. Family comes first, Sophia. I looked from her to my father, both of them united in their disapproval. When has this family ever put me first? When I was studying for the bar exam, you said I was being antisocial. When I started my firm, you called it reckless. The only time you remember I exist is when you want something from me. That's not true, my father said, but his tone lacked conviction. Madison's cheeks flushed, though her voice was sugar-coated. You've always been jealous, Sophia. Jealous of me, of my life, of the fact that I'm getting married and will have the family you'll never have. I stared at her. Jealous? No, Madison. I'm disappointed. Disappointed that you think you can take what I've worked for just because you want it. Her smile vanished, replaced by something colder. I deserve it, Sophia. I deserve the penthouse, the respect, the life you've been hoarding. And there it was, the mask slipping, the entitlement laid bare. I didn't realize it then, but the crowd nearby had gone quieter. Conversations were slowing. Heads were turning toward us. The first ring of an audience was forming. The opening act was over. The real show was about to begin. I could feel the air shift. The chatter of champagne-fueled conversation faded into an odd, prickling silence. Not complete quiet, just that heavy pause people get when they're trying to pretend they're not eavesdropping. Madison stepped closer, her perfume sweet and cloying. You've always acted like you're better than us, she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. But deep down, you're just lonely. My father nodded, as if she'd made a valid legal argument. Sophia, this isn't just about you. This is about family legacy. Madison and Ethan will carry it forward. Well, you've got your work, but that's not the same. My work is everything I've built, I said. And this penthouse is part of that. You don't get to decide it's suddenly the family's to give away. Helen's hand tightened on her clutch. You don't need it. You'll thank us one day for pushing you to do the right thing. The muscles in my jaw ached from holding back. What exactly is the right thing, Mother? Handing over my home because Madison can't be bothered to earn her own? Gasps rippled around us. Madison's eyes glittered with something between rage and triumph. At least I don't push people away. At least I know how to be part of a family. That's funny, I said, voice low. Because I've been part of this family my whole life and I've never seen you lift a finger for anyone but yourself. Her smile dropped entirely. She turned to our father. You see? This is why she doesn't deserve it. She's cold. She's selfish. She's done, I finished for her. I'm done being your backup plan, your ATM, your punching bag. That's when Richard's voice sharpened. Enough, Sophia. His eyes burned into mine, the kind of look he'd used when I was a teenager, the one meant to make me fold. I didn't fold. Guests were openly watching now. A few held up phones, though I couldn't tell if they were recording or pretending to check messages. The circle around us tightened, like predators moving in. Madison leaned in, her words meant for me but loud enough to carry. You can give it to me now, or I'll take it. One way or another, I always get what I want. That was the exact moment something in me snapped, not in anger but in clarity. I wasn't going to back down, not here, not ever again, and that, I think, was what pushed my father over the edge. His hand twitched at his side, his jaw flexed. I didn't know it yet, but we were seconds away from the moment that would be replayed on social media for weeks, dissected by people I'd never met, and most importantly, witnessed by a federal prosecutor who would change the entire game. Richard took a slow step toward me, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The sound echoed in the space between us, sharp and deliberate. You're embarrassing yourself, he said, his voice low but lethal. And you're embarrassing this family. I felt the old, familiar pressure building in my chest, the one I used to feel when I was a kid, and he'd corner me after dinner, his disappointment dripping from every word. Back then, I'd learned to swallow my arguments, to smooth things over. Tonight, I felt none of that instinct. You've been embarrassing yourselves for years, I said. I'm just not covering for you anymore. Helen's gasp was theatrical, the kind of thing she might do at a dinner party to make herself look like the victim. How dare you speak to your father that way? How dare you demand I give up my home? I shot back. How dare you turn my hard work into your bargaining chip? Around us, the air seemed to thicken. The wedding band had slowed to an awkward, meandering background noise, as if even the musicians were listening. A woman in a gold dress whispered to the man beside her. He shook his head, eyes locked on us. Madison's cheeks were flushed, her breathing quick. This is exactly why I've always been the better child. I make Mom and Dad proud. You just make money. You mean I make them proud by funding their favorite? I said. And when I stop, suddenly I'm the selfish one. My father's hand tightened into a fist. Enough. I took a small step closer. No, not enough. You've belittled me, dismissed me, and now you're trying to strip away something I earned. You think you can shame me into it in front of all these people? That flicker, that split-second twitch in his jaw was all the warning I got. Sophia, he said, voice dropping to a dangerous calm. You will give that penthouse to your sister, or you'll regret it. I tilted my head. I regret coming here tonight. I regret thinking for even a moment that you saw me as anything other than an asset to be exploited. His shoulders squared, his fingers flexed, once, twice. And then Madison, the perfect bride, tipped the match into the gasoline. You're pathetic, Sophia. Nobody will ever love you enough to fill that empty apartment. You might as well hand it over to someone who can make it a real home. The words weren't loud, but they were sharp enough to cut through the murmur of the crowd. A few guests turned away in awkward discomfort. Others leaned in, hungry for more drama. Richard glanced at Madison, then back at me, his expression tightening into something I couldn't quite read. Pride? Anger? Resolve? And that's when I noticed her. Elaine Carter, standing just beyond the circle, her eyes narrowed. She wasn't a family friend. She wasn't here for the champagne. She was watching like a hawk, the way you'd watch a witness on the stand who was about to break. What I didn't know yet was that she'd remember every second of what was about to happen. The ballroom had gone almost still. Even the clinking of cutlery had stopped. Richard's eyes locked on mine. There was no softness, no hesitation, just the cold authority of a man used to getting his way. I could feel the heat of his breath even across the small space between us. You've taken this far enough, he said. No, Dad, I replied, my voice steady. I've taken it just far enough to finally tell you that you don't control me anymore. And a murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back coughed. The sound was absurdly loud in the tension. Richard's gaze flicked to Madison. She gave him a tiny nod, as though granting permission. And then his hand moved. The arc of it was almost slow motion, the glint of his wedding band under the chandelier light, the shift of air against my cheek, the split second where I thought he's not really going to do it. He did. The crack of skin on skin rang out like a gunshot. My head jerked to the side, my vision flashing white. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was the pounding in my ears. Gasps erupted around me, followed by a stunned hush. My cheek burned, the heat radiating outward like a brand. I could taste copper on my tongue, where my teeth had caught the inside of my lip, and then came the whispers. Oh my God, did you see that? Right in front of everyone. She deserved it. The way she was talking to him. Not all the voices were condemning him. Some were condemning me. That's what made my stomach twist, the knowledge that for some people, this was entertainment. Through the blur, I found Elaine Carter again. She hadn't moved. She was watching, arms crossed, her jaw tight. Her gaze flicked briefly to my father, then back to me. No pity, just assessment. Madison stepped into my line of sight, her smile small but triumphant. Maybe now, she said quietly. You'll start acting like a real daughter. I straightened, forcing myself to meet her gaze. Maybe now you'll see what a real daughter does when her family crosses the line. My fingers itched for my phone. I could feel the weight of it in my clutch like an invitation. Around us, guests leaned in, sensing a second act. "You're not walking away from this," Richard said. His voice was lower now, but every word was a threat. I smiled. "No, Dad, you're not." I pulled out my phone and began typing, my thumbs flying over the screen. It was almost muscle memory names of trusted colleagues, journalists who owed me favors, clients who wielded influence in the kind of circles my father depended on. "What are you doing?" Helen demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. "Making sure the truth doesn't get buried," I said without looking up. Madison tried to grab my wrist, but I stepped back, hitting send before she could touch me. A second later, the first vibration buzzed in my palm, replies already coming in. Shock. Outrage. Support. The crowd's energy shifted. No longer passive observers, they were suddenly restless. People glanced at their phones, murmuring to each other. The story was already spreading beyond these walls. Elaine took a slow step forward, her voice calm but carrying. "Mr. Hale," she said, "do you have any idea who you just struck? Or who was watching?" Richard stiffened. "This is a private family matter." "Not anymore," Elaine replied. Her eyes never left mine. "Not after tonight." I could feel the balance tilting, the ground shifting under all of us. Richard's jaw worked, but he didn't speak. Madison's grip on her bouquet tightened until her knuckles whitened. And me? For the first time all evening, I felt entirely steady. My cheek throbbed, but it was nothing compared to the sharp, clean certainty settling in my chest. They thought they'd humiliate me into surrender. Instead, they'd handed me the kind of leverage you can't buy. And I was going to use every ounce of it. The ballroom was no longer a wedding reception, it was a pressure cooker. You could feel the heat rising off the crowd, a mixture of adrenaline, discomfort, and the thrill of watching something they shouldn't. I slipped my phone back into my clutch and looked at my father, my mother, and my sister, each one tight-lipped, each one thinking the same thing. This will blow over. It wouldn't. The first buzz came again. And then another. I glanced down at the screen. Messages from colleagues, journalists, even a judge I'd worked with 2 years ago. My name was already out there, attached to the words, "slapped at sister's wedding," and "penthouse dispute." Hashtags were forming in real time. Elaine Carter stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. The air seemed to part for her. In a tailored navy suit that looked wildly out of place among the sequins and chiffon, she moved with the confidence of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. "Sophia," she said, "are you all right?" "Yes," I said. "Better than I've been in years." Her eyes flicked to my father. "Mr. Hale, I'm Elaine Carter, U.S. Attorney's Office." The title landed like a gavel. A few guests actually straightened their posture. "This is a family matter," my father said again, louder this time as if volume could restore control. Elaine's tone was smooth, but it cut like a scalpel. "When you strike someone in public, in front of witnesses, many of whom are officers of the court, it stops being a family matter." She turned slightly, addressing the ring of guests. "How many of you saw it?" Hands rose. Too many hands. I almost smiled. Elaine's attention returned to me. "Do you want to press charges?" The room went so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. My mother's eyes widened. Madison's lips parted in a small, panicked, "No, not tonight," I said. "I'm not finished here." Her eyebrow lifted slightly, but she nodded. "Your call. But if you change your mind, you know where to find me." That was the moment I knew. I had more than leverage. I had an ally. I took a step forward, facing my parents and Madison, but pitching my voice so it carried to the audience. "You've all just witnessed what my family thinks is acceptable. You saw my father strike me because I wouldn't hand over my home like some party favor. You heard my sister say she deserves what I worked for. You heard my mother call me selfish for not giving up the roof over my head." Murmurs broke out again, angrier this time. Phones were up now, openly recording. "This is who they are," I said, "and I'm done protecting them." Madison hissed. "You can't just—" "Can't I?" I cut her off. You just watched me send the truth to every contact I have in this city, lawyers, reporters, business leaders, people who understand that family doesn't mean exploitation. Family doesn't mean assault, and family doesn't mean laughing while your own is humiliated. Elaine's voice slid in like steel under velvet. She's right. This is bigger than you think, Mr. Hale. Much bigger. My father's jaw worked, but no sound came out. For a man who could talk his way out of almost anything, the silence was telling. I could feel the tide turning in the room. Guests who'd been smirking earlier now avoided Madison's eyes. Ethan was shifting uncomfortably, his hand loosening on hers. Even Helen looked rattled, her perfectly composed expression beginning to crack. I'm keeping my penthouse, I said finally. And you will never threaten me like this again. I didn't wait for their reply. I stepped past them, toward Elaine, who met my gaze with a small knowing nod. Somewhere behind me I heard Madison's voice break. Dad, do something. But there was nothing left for him to do. The story was already out. By the time I left the ballroom, the story had already outgrown the walls of the Langmore. Hashtags were blooming like weeds. Hale wedding slap, penthouse gate, and my personal favorite, hands off Sophia. My phone vibrated non-stop as clips of the slap multiplied across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Elaine walked with me toward the elevators, her stride calm and purposeful. I meant what I said in there, she told me. If you decide to press charges, you'll have no shortage of witnesses. I didn't answer right away. I was still processing the fact that my father had done it, that in front of 200 people, he'd raised his hand to me and believed he could walk away untouched. By morning, the press had a field day. Local news stations ran the headline, "Prominent businessman strikes daughter at society wedding." My inbox filled with interview requests. Page 6 published a freeze frame of my father's hand mid-swing. Richard's construction company issued a bland statement about a private misunderstanding. It didn't land well. By the end of the week, 3 major contracts were under review and 1 had been pulled entirely. Madison's perfect life began to fray faster than I expected. The PR agency where she worked announced she was on leave after several high-profile clients threatened to withdraw. Her Instagram, once filled with glowing engagement photos and wedding hashtags, turned into a battlefield of angry comments. And Ethan wasn't used to this kind of attention. A financial blog dug into his firm's records, uncovering some questionable investment partnerships. Rumors swirled that the SEC had taken interest. He stopped posting altogether. Helen called first. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. Sophia, this has gone far enough. You're destroying the family. No, I told her. I'm exposing it. Richard's call came next. His tone was harder, but I could hear the strain. We can fix this. If you'll just come out and say you overreacted. I laughed. I didn't overreact. I underreacted. You're lucky I haven't pressed charges. Yet. That yet was intentional. I wanted him to feel the ground shift under his feet. Elaine checked in twice over the next week. She didn't push. She just made it clear she was there, and that our office had noticed some interesting irregularities in the finances of Hale Construction. She didn't say she was investigating, but she didn't have to. The implication hung in the air like smoke. The social consequences hit harder than even I expected. Invitations to events dried up for my parents almost overnight. Their country club temporarily suspended. Their membership pending a review. Madison's so-called friends stopped returning her calls. For years, they'd all carried themselves as if nothing could touch them. Now, they couldn't walk into a restaurant without whispers following them to the table. It would be easy to say I felt vindicated, and in a way, I did. But there was also a quiet sadness mourning the idea of a family I'd never actually had. What was left now was the truth. They didn't protect me because they didn't see me as worth protecting. Elaine summed it up best over coffee one afternoon. They thought they could take from you without consequence. You showed them there are always consequences. I nodded. And I didn't even have to press charges. Yet. She smiled faintly. Keep that in your pocket. Sometimes the possibility is more powerful than the act itself. By the second week, Richard's company shares had dropped 15%. Ethan's firm was in damage control mode. Madison's absence from work was rumored to be permanent. They had wanted my penthouse. Instead, they'd lost their reputations. 6 months later, the echoes of that night were still rippling outward. Madison and Ethan had separated. Officially, it was irreconcilable differences. Unofficially, it was the financial strain, the public scrutiny, and the fact that neither could stand to be in the same room without blaming the other for the fallout. Richard's company never recovered the contracts it lost. The board forced him into early retirement, though the press release called it a graceful transition. Helen kept up appearances as best she could, but the invitations never came back. The social exile was complete. And me? I kept my penthouse, turned one bedroom into a home office, another into a guest room for the people I actually wanted in my life. My practice grew fueled in part by clients who'd heard my name not just for my legal skills, but for the fact I refused to be intimidated. I never pressed charges, though the option remained open. Elaine's subtle warning to my father that certain files might one day cross her desk was enough to keep him cautious. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in the ballroom, the sting on my cheek, the hum of whispers, the glint in Elaine Carter's eyes. It was the breaking point, yes, but it was also the beginning of something I should have claimed a long time ago. My right to say no. They thought they could shame me into surrender. Instead, they taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. You don't get to decide what I give. You don't get to decide what I keep. And you don't get to put your hands on me ever. That's not just my boundary, that's the law.